Hello everyone, I'm William the Storyteller, and I'm here to guide you into a peaceful rest tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It begins with rain. Gentle, endless rain that patters on rooftops and drips through the tall pine branches above. A narrow road winds through the forest, slick with moss and rainwater, leading to a place few speak of anymore, Eldermere. I arrived at night when fog clung low to the road and headlights barely cut through the gloom. The sign was crooked. Welcome to Eldermere, population? A joke perhaps, or a warning. The innkeeper was the first to speak. You're here for the cottage, she said without introduction, pushing forward a key with a rusted tag, Rowan Hollow. I nodded, though I hadn't told anyone my name, nor mentioned where I was staying. Rowan Hollow sat at the very edge of the village, just where the forest grew thick and twisted. It was an old stone house, hunched like a sleeping animal, roof sagging under decades of rainfall. The key turned heavily in the lock. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and something older, like time trapped in dust. That first night, the storm rolled in. Thunder groaned low across the hills, and I lay awake listening to the wind whisper through the pines. It almost sounded like voices. Not speech. Not quite. But something like it. The next morning, I found the village nearly deserted. Doors were shut. Windows were covered in thick black cloth from the inside. The only shop open was the apothecary, where a frail old man sold herbs and rainwater tonics. You hear them yet? He asked. I didn't answer. That night, the whispering grew louder. Each night after, something changed. First, the trees outside began to shift. I saw them moving, branches bending without wind, roots rising and retreating like breathing. On the fourth night, I found muddy footprints in the hallway. Small, barefoot, leading from the front door to the bedroom. The door had remained locked. By the fifth night, I stopped sleeping altogether. I began to research. The town library was mostly empty, but I found a leather-bound ledger wedged behind the old village map. The book was filled with journal entries from a man named Reverend T. Rowan, the town's founder. He wrote of a great pine spirit, an ancient force in the woods that demanded tribute every 20 winters. The offering? A soul willing to listen. Not speak. Just listen. Once the pines begin to whisper, the chosen must not flee, Rowan wrote. To flee is to bring ruin. On the sixth night, I dreamt of the forest swallowing the house whole. The trees grew impossibly tall and wrapped the cottage in branches, lifting it like a cradle. I could hear them clearer now. The whispering was layered, male, female, childlike, ancient, all murmuring at once. When I awoke, the house was surrounded, not by people, but by tall figures made of bark and moss, eyes glowing faintly beneath hollowed-out knots in their heads. They didn't move. They just listened. I tried to leave. Packed a bag, drove toward the road that led back to the highway, but no matter how far I drove, the road looped back to Eldermere. I passed the same bent pine, the same hollow stump, the same half-rotted fox carcass. I stopped at the inn. The innkeeper was waiting. You tried to leave? She said, no emotion. Just disappointment. They've chosen you. You need to listen. That night, I sat in the middle of Rowan Hollow, every light out. Rain tapped gently on the roof. I let the whispering fill the space. I stopped fighting it, and something strange happened. I could understand them. They weren't threatening. They weren't evil. They were lonely. Forgotten memories. Echoes of every soul that had ever stayed here, every soul who had once been chosen. Their stories poured into my ears. The widow waiting by the sea, the boy who vanished with the crows, the merchant who dug too deep and never returned. Each whisper was a story. Each voice, a past life asking not to be lost. The next day I spoke to no one. I walked the woods, sat beneath the old trees. I let the pines speak, and in return they offered peace. And the villagers began to open their windows. They nodded in quiet approval. Weeks passed. The storm never ended, but it became comforting. The thunder was a lullaby, the fog a blanket. The pines no longer whispered for fear or warning, but for companionship. And I stayed, because when I finally understood them, when I finally gave up trying to run or fix or flee, I found something I didn't expect. Rest. If you're hearing this and the rain feels a little heavier, the pines outside your window seem to lean just slightly closer. Don't be afraid. They might be whispering to you too. Just listen and sleep. The rain didn't stop. It was steady, soft, constant. A hush across the village, across the rooftops, across my thoughts. The whispering pines still spoke, less like voices now, more like memories carried on wind. I'd been in Eldermere for how long? A month? I stopped keeping track. The outside world faded like an old photograph, one left too long in the sun. This forest, this place, was all there was, and something was changing. It began with the dreams, always the same. A white mask floating in the trees, a voice calling, distant but warm. And beneath the ground, a thrum, like a heartbeat or a drum slowed by centuries. I would wake with my fingers tingling, the scent of pine thick in my lungs, the sound of rain on the windows like gentle knocking. One morning, I stepped outside and saw a ring of stones placed carefully on the ground. Smooth, flat, gray. Not from this area. They circled my cottage perfectly, 12 stones spaced exactly like a clock. Inside the ring, the grass was greener. Outside it, the trees had drawn closer. That afternoon, I walked into the village hoping to find answers. Most homes were shuttered, windows covered with thick fabric. But the apothecary was open, dim candlelight flickering through dusty glass. The old man behind the counter looked at me. He didn't smile. "You've been chosen," he said. "Chosen for what?" I asked. "To remember," he whispered, placing a bundle of dried herbs into a black pouch, "and to carry it forward." I didn't understand that, but I took the pouch. That night, the dreams changed. I was walking through fog. The trees stood like sentinels, tall, thin, wet with rain. The ground was soft, the air still. And there, between two twisted trunks, was the mask, resting on a stump, white as bone. No face behind it, just watching. Then a voice, neither male nor female, spoke softly. "Underneath it waits." The next morning, I followed instantly. Behind the cottage, past the bent pine tree and the overgrown path, I found it. A stone door, circular, set into the earth like a sunken lid. No handle, just a smooth surface with a faint, spiraling gradient. I knelt beside it. The whispering grew stronger, not louder, but deeper, like it came from under the roots. Rain soaked my sleeves as I traced the spiral with my fingers, and the earth shifted. The door slid open silently. Beneath it, stone steps spiraling into blackness. I stared for a long time, listening. The forest had gone still. No birds, no wind, only rain. I lit a lantern, and I descended.